Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a gaslit Victorian bedroom, somewhere around the year 1875, where the world outside has finally slowed and the city streets are settling into that soft nighttime hush. The coal fires in the distance burn low, carriage wheels rattle less often on the cobblestones, and the faint glow of street lamps flickers through thin curtains. You climb into a tall wooden bed piled with quilts and blankets, hoping for a peaceful night's sleep. Unfortunately, sleep in the Victorian era is not always so cooperative. You pull the covers up, listening to the quiet creaks of the house. Somewhere downstairs a clock ticks with the seriousness of a judge. Somewhere outside a cat knocks over a metal bucket like it's performing a dramatic opera solo. And inside your mind, thoughts continue marching around like they've been given a full military parade permit. Congratulations, you've officially joined the great Victorian struggle. Insomnia. Now, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in tonight, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always strangely comforting knowing people all around the world are drifting off to sleep together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lie in bed staring at the ceiling beams, wondering how on earth people in the 1800s handled sleepless nights without streaming shows, meditation apps, or those oddly comforting YouTube videos where someone whispers about medieval bread for 2 hours. The truth is, Victorians worried about sleep almost as much as we do today. By the mid-19th century, doctors were already writing about something they called nervous insomnia. The industrial world was speeding up. Telegraphs were sending messages across continents in minutes. Newspapers delivered fresh worries every morning. Factories demanded long hours. Railways made travel faster than anyone had ever imagined. And apparently, the human brain responded by refusing to shut up at night. Medical journals of the time frequently described insomnia as a symptom of overstimulated nerves. Victorian physicians believed that modern life, crowded cities, constant noise, mental work could overstretch the delicate human nervous system. Which is a polite Victorian way of saying your brain won't stop replaying awkward conversations from 3 days ago. But unlike today, Victorians didn't reach for blue light blocking glasses or sleep podcasts about ancient pottery. Instead, they developed an entire universe of bedtime habits, remedies, rituals, and slightly questionable medical advice. Some of it was comforting, some of it was odd, and some of it, you probably won't survive this. Not dramatically, of course. But if someone in 2026 suggested half these remedies, you'd probably back slowly out of the room while pretending you left the oven on. Still, people trusted them. Picture the bedroom around you. The Victorian bed is tall, often so high that a small wooden stool sits beside it to help you climb in. The mattress is usually stuffed with horsehair, feathers, or straw, which means it is both lumpy and mysteriously squeaky. Luxury, apparently. Feather mattresses were considered especially desirable because they moulded to the body. Though if the feathers shifted in the night, and they absolutely did, you could wake up feeling like you'd been slowly rolled into a bread burrito. But the real challenge was the environment. Victorian homes were full of sounds. Wooden frames creaked as temperatures changed. Pipes groaned like distant sea monsters. Coal fires popped occasionally in the grate. Outside, horses clopped down streets even at late hours. Historians often point out that urban noise in the 1800s could be surprisingly constant. And yet, despite all that noise, many Victorians believed that sleep itself was delicate, almost like a shy animal that might run away if disturbed. Because of this, entire bedtime routines began forming around the idea of gently inviting sleep to arrive. One common piece of advice from doctors was simple: calm the mind before bed. That sounds obvious today, but Victorian physicians often insisted that mental stimulation at night was dangerous. Reading exciting novels, discussing business, or arguing politics before bed could allegedly heat the brain. Which is a wonderfully dramatic phrase. You can almost imagine someone lying awake thinking, "Oh dear, my brain appears to be overheating again." Instead, doctors recommended peaceful evening activities, gentle reading, quiet conversation, prayer, writing in a diary. And yes, Victorians absolutely loved diaries. Many people kept journals beside their beds to empty their minds before sleep. The idea was simple. If you wrote down your worries, they might stop circling your thoughts like stubborn pigeons. Modern psychologists might actually approve of that. Another fascinating belief involved the timing of sleep itself. Today we assume people historically slept straight through the night, but historians still argue whether many Europeans once practiced something called segmented sleep. The theory suggests that people often slept in two shifts, first sleep and second sleep, with a quiet waking period in the middle. During that midnight gap, people sometimes prayed, read, or even visited neighbours. Imagine knocking on someone's door at 2:00 am because you both woke up between sleep sessions. Strangely wholesome. Still, insomnia worried Victorian doctors enough that medical textbooks began listing dozens of possible cures. These ranged from sensible lifestyle changes to things that sounded like they were invented during a particularly experimental dinner party. Warm drinks, herbal pillows, strict walking routines, electric belts, and bottles of mysterious sleeping tonics that promised to calm your nerves like a gentle lullaby, though sometimes they worked more like a very determined hammer. But before we reach the stranger inventions of the era, you begin tonight where many Victorian families did. The kitchen. Because long before pharmacies and electric devices entered the story, the first line of defence against insomnia came from something far simpler. A warm drink before bed. Maybe milk. Maybe cocoa. Maybe a pinch of nutmeg stirred quietly into the cup. As you settle deeper under the blankets, listening to the faint hum of the sleeping house, you begin to realise something comforting. For all the strange remedies Victorians tried, their basic goal was the same as yours tonight: to quiet the mind, to soften the day's worries, and to finally, gently, drift into sleep. Which means the next stop on your journey through Victorian insomnia is not a doctor's office, but a late-night kitchen glowing softly under candlelight, where someone is preparing a drink that thousands of Victorians swore could send even the most stubborn mind peacefully to sleep. The house has grown quieter now. The clock downstairs continues its patient ticking, but the rest of the world seems to have softened into that strange middle-of-the-night calm, where every small sound feels larger than it really is. Your eyes remain stubbornly open, so you do what many Victorians would have done in this exact situation. You slip out of bed. The floorboards greet your bare feet with a polite but unmistakable creak. Victorian houses were not particularly interested in stealth. Every hallway had its own orchestra of squeaks, groans and sighs, like the building itself was commenting on your insomnia. You shuffle toward the kitchen. A faint candle burns on the table, and the room still carries the comforting smells of the evening meal, bread, roasted vegetables, maybe a bit of stew that someone forgot to fully clean from the pot. Kitchens in Victorian homes were more than cooking spaces. They were small nighttime pharmacies where generations of simple remedies lived quietly on shelves. And the first one waiting for you tonight is perhaps the most famous sleep cure of all. Warm milk. Victorians believed strongly in the calming power of milk before bed. It appears in household manuals, doctors' advice columns, and even polite dinner conversations. Warm milk, they said, soothed the nerves and settled the stomach. Modern science would eventually point out that milk contains tryptophan, a compound that helps the body produce sleep-related chemicals like serotonin and melatonin. Victorians, of course, did not know the chemistry. They simply knew that a warm cup in the dark kitchen often made people feel sleepy. You heat the milk slowly over a small stove flame, watching the surface tremble gently in the pot. In many homes, the milk was flavoured with something special. A dash of nutmeg was extremely popular. Now, nutmeg might sound like an innocent spice sitting quietly in your kitchen cabinet today, but Victorians treated it almost like a mild medicinal miracle. Cookbooks and home guides recommended tiny amounts of nutmeg for digestion, relaxation, and, most importantly, sleep. And when they said tiny amounts, they really meant it. Because while nutmeg in small quantities can be calming, larger amounts can have, let's say, unexpected effects. Historians occasionally mention that people who accidentally overdid the nutmeg sometimes experience dizziness or strange dreams. So if your Victorian grandmother ever warned you about adding just a pinch, she wasn't exaggerating. The Victorians liked their sleep, but they were not trying to enter the dream dimension permanently. Another common nighttime addition was honey. A spoonful stirred into warm milk created a drink that was both sweet and comforting, something like a primitive version of modern bedtime tea. But honey wasn't just about taste. Victorians believed it helped coat the throat and calm the body after long days of work or conversation. Medical guides from the 19th century often linked digestion and sleep very closely. If your stomach was upset, they believed, your sleep would suffer. And honestly, that part still checks out. Victorian doctors frequently warned patients not to go to bed with an active stomach. Large meals late at night were thought to disturb the brain by forcing the body to keep working while it should be resting. So imagine yourself standing there in the quiet kitchen, sipping your warm milk with honey and nutmeg, while the candle flickers against the walls. You're essentially participating in a bedtime ritual that millions of people followed throughout the 1800s. But milk wasn't the only drink people trusted. Another Victorian favourite was cocoa. Yes, hot chocolate, but slightly less sugary and far more serious. Cocoa had become increasingly popular during the 19th century as trade expanded through colonial routes bringing cacao from the Americas to Europe. Many Victorian households kept cocoa powder specifically for evening drinks. Interestingly, doctors were divided about whether cocoa actually helped sleep. Some believed its mild stimulant properties might keep people awake. Others insisted that the warmth and comfort of the drink outweighed any stimulating effect. Historians still argue whether cocoa was considered truly medicinal or simply a pleasant tradition people didn't want to give up. You can almost picture Victorian doctors debating it in a quiet study. Cocoa excites the nerves. Nonsense, sir, it comforts them. Meanwhile, everyone in the room is secretly hoping someone brings more cocoa. But perhaps the most charming of all kitchen sleep remedies involved bread. Victorian households often recommended a small piece of toast before bed for people suffering from insomnia. The reasoning was simple. A light snack could stabilise the stomach without overloading it. One 19th century health guide suggested toasted bread with a thin layer of butter and a sprinkle of sugar, which sounds suspiciously like someone invented a midnight snack and then dressed it up as medical advice. Not that we're judging. Midnight toast is a respectable life choice. Another curious remedy involved onions. Yes, onions. Certain Victorian herbal traditions suggested that eating raw onion before bed could calm the nerves and encourage sleep. The belief likely came from older folk medicine traditions where onions were considered powerful health boosters. Whether this helped sleep is questionable, but it definitely ensured no one else in the household wanted to share your pillow. Still, the kitchen offered something more than just ingredients. It offered a quiet moment away from the bed where frustration had begun building. Victorian doctors often recommended leaving the bed if sleep wouldn't come. Lying awake too long was believed to create anxiety that made insomnia worse. Modern sleep specialists give almost identical advice today. So you sip your warm drink slowly, leaning against the wooden table, watching candlelight flicker across the room. The night feels calmer now. Your mind begins loosening its grip on the day's worries. And as you finally return upstairs, carrying that warm comfort back to bed, you notice something interesting about Victorian life. Their remedies were rarely dramatic at first. They began with the simplest tools available: food, warmth, routine, and patience. Of course, simplicity didn't last forever, because once kitchens had done all they could, many Victorians turned their attention to another gentle solution waiting quietly in their bedrooms. Not food, not medicine, but scent. And in gardens across Britain and Europe, people were already growing a plant whose soft purple flowers carried a reputation as one of the most peaceful sleep aids the Victorian world had ever known. Lavender. By the time you return to your bedroom, the house feels even quieter than before. Your warm drink has softened the edges of your thoughts, but sleep still hasn't fully arrived. The candle on the bedside table flickers gently, casting long shadows across the room. Outside, the night air drifts through a slightly open window, carrying faint scents from gardens and damp soil. And in the Victorian world, scent was not just pleasant, it was medicinal. You lean back against the pillows and notice something tucked beneath the linen. A small cloth pouch rests quietly inside the pillowcase. If you give it a gentle squeeze, it releases a soft, calming fragrance. Lavender. Victorians adored lavender. They used it in soaps, perfumes, bathwater, cleaning solutions, and, most importantly for tonight, in sleep remedies. Lavender had been associated with relaxation for centuries, long before the Victorian era arrived with its love of routines and domestic rituals. Ancient Romans reportedly added lavender to bathhouses, believing it refreshed both body and spirit. But during the 19th century, lavender became something closer to a nighttime guardian. Many Victorian households kept lavender sachets inside pillows or placed small bowls of dried flowers near the bed. The scent was believed to calm the nerves and invite peaceful dreams. Modern research actually suggests lavender can reduce anxiety and help people fall asleep faster. So for once, Victorian wisdom might have been quietly ahead of its time. You breathe in slowly, letting the scent settle around you. Victorian herbal guides often described lavender as a nerve tonic. The phrase appears repeatedly in medical texts of the 1800s. The nervous system fascinated Victorian doctors, who believed it controlled everything from sleep to mood to digestion. And in their minds, lavender gently soothed that system like a quiet lullaby. But lavender was only the beginning. The Victorian love of herbal sleep remedies expanded into entire nighttime gardens. Many households, especially in rural areas, grew plants specifically known for calming properties. One popular herb was chamomile. You might recognise chamomile today from sleepy tea commercials promising peaceful rest. Victorians knew it too, though they often used it in different ways. Chamomile flowers were dried and placed into pillows, brewed into warm drinks, or steeped into bathwater before bed. Some herbalists even recommended washing your face with chamomile water before sleeping, which sounds soothing, unless you accidentally used the entire pot and smelled like a walking teacup the next morning. Another plant that Victorians trusted was valerian root. Now, valerian is a fascinating herb because its smell is, well, complicated. To some people it smells earthy and calming, to others it smells like gym socks that have gone through an emotional crisis. And yet Victorian herbalists insisted valerian was one of the strongest natural sleep aids available. The root was dried, crushed, and brewed into teas or tinctures meant to calm anxious minds. Doctors sometimes recommended valerian for what they called nervous agitation, a phrase that probably described half the population trying to survive industrial-era stress. But the Victorian herbal catalogue didn't stop there. Lemon balm, for example, was another gentle favourite. This leafy herb produced a soft citrus scent that many people believed lifted mood and reduced nighttime restlessness. You might imagine someone in a quiet countryside cottage crushing fresh lemon balm leaves between